Hey, I'm Jay Holland. Welcome back to Guided by Faith as we continue this powerful series on cultural transformation because of the gospel. Can the most violent tribe in the world become known for peace? What would cause a people consumed by revenge and murder to lay down their spears and pick up the word of God? That's the story that I'm going to tell you today in our series, When the Gospel Takes Root. And it's one of the most dramatic transformations in modern mission history. And it's one that I learned first when I was a little Bible college student many years ago at Liberty University. Let's begin with this anchor verse. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. That's Romans 12:21. In the 1950s, the Wadani tribe, sometimes also known as the Auca Indians, lived deep in the Amazon rainforest in Ecuador. Anthropologists later described them as one of the most violent people groups ever recorded. Murder, especially revenge killing, was embedded in their way of life, and it was said that over 60% of adult deaths among the Waodani were from homicide. But that's not how the world first heard about them. We learned about them through a tragedy. In 1956, 5 young missionaries, Jim Elliot, Nate Saint, Ed McCauley, Pete Fleming, and Roger Yadiran, set out to bring the gospel to the Wadani. They made peaceful contact, they exchanged gifts, and they prayed fervently. But shortly after that, all 5 of them were speared to death on a sandy riverbank. The story made global headlines, and it looked like a tragedy, a failure. But it wasn't the end. It was the beginning, actually, of redemption. Instead of running from the tribe that killed her husband, Elizabeth Elliot, along with Rachel Saint, which was Nate Saint's sister, returned and lived among the very people that had taken the lives of their loved ones. They didn't go with weapons or vengeance. They went with forgiveness, language tools, medical supplies, and the message of Jesus. Slowly, hearts began to open. The killers themselves, men like Minkei, who had helped spear the missionaries, were changed by the gospel. They confessed, they repented, and they were baptized by the very families of the men that they killed. Over time, violence in the tribe plummeted. The cycle of revenge was broken, and today many Waodani are believers, and some have become missionaries to other tribes. What the world saw as defeat actually became a story of resurrection. You see, the Waodani didn't just become a little bit nicer. They were completely transformed. The gospel turned a killing field into a mission field, and perhaps the most powerful image of all, Steve Saint, the son of murdered missionary Nate Saint, was baptized by Minkei, the very man who'd speared his father. So if you don't follow that, let me tell it this way. Minkei was one of the men who met the missionaries on the beach. Minkei speared to death Nate Saint. And then years later, when Steve Saint becomes a Christian, Steve is Nate's little son who grew up without his dad. Steve becomes a Christian, and guess who baptizes him? The very guy who murdered his dad. That's how powerful the transformation was. Later, Steve and Minkei traveled the world together, sharing their story of forgiveness and redemption and the power of the gospel to overcome bloodshed. There's an incredible movie called The End of the Spear, which talks about this very story, the whole story. You can also learn a lot by, if you like reading, Jim Elliot, one of the missionaries who died, has his autobiography. There's a book written by his wife, Elizabeth Elliot, called Through the Gates of Splendor. Jim was an incredibly gifted linguist, but also writer and athlete before he went to the jungles of Ecuador. And a lot of people really chastised him and said, like, you are so valuable, you are so beneficial to the churches in the United States, all of the talents and gifts you have, you're better off here. And he wrote in his journal, it's one of the quotes that all-time favorite quotes, "He is no fool who gives up what he cannot keep to gain that which he cannot lose." He is no fool who gives up what he cannot keep to gain that which he cannot lose. Now, Jim gave up his life on that sandy beach, having never got to actually share the gospel with any of the people that he had been praying for. But his wife did. And many of the very people that murdered him became believers and missionaries. Now, Romans 12:21 says, "Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good." And that's exactly what the gospel did in the lives of the 5 men who laid down their lives, in the hearts of the women who forgave, and in the soul of the tribe that was once ruled by death, revenge, and murder. And I hope this encourages you as you think about whatever challenges you have, as you think about whatever culture you're living in, how decadent it might feel, how unredeemable it might feel, that God has done bigger things and God has done more things. All it takes is faithful believers stepping forward in love and in forgiveness and in boldness to obey Jesus. Now, tomorrow we're going to travel to Wales, where a spiritual revival over 100 years ago didn't just fill churches. It actually emptied bars, changed laws, and turned a nation's heart towards God. I hope you come back, and I hope you ask a friend to join you and listen into this as well. And I hope that you don't just hear this as an inspirational story, but as a conviction and motivation of, if these people boldly shared, regardless of the cost, and if these people forgave, regardless of how steep the price was, what is God calling me to do today in my life and my world? Remember, he is no fool who gives up what he cannot keep to gain that which he cannot lose. Good talking to you today. I look forward to talking again tomorrow.